The Fun Police. Yes, the Blizzard bot has detected an unintended gameplay experience, and by golly, they have destroyed it. So this is an interesting topic. It has just came up on the patch 8.2 PTR, and this is going to be a video that you can listen to. You don't need to actually watch it. I don't want to do this highly edited because there is a lore video that we're editing right now, and I don't want this bit of breaking news to take away from the content that I really care about the most, which is the lore. So what's actually happened here? Well, Blizzard have decided that if you are in a group with somebody who has got their experience disabled, then you will receive 95% less experience. So what does this mean? Well, right now, for Battle for Azeroth, people at level 110 would actually lock their characters into level 110. They would get Heart of Azeroth, they would get bits of Azerite gear, they would try to power those things up as much as they can. Then they would get really high Titan Forges from Antorus, as well as their legendaries and all of that stuff, and really good like BFA gems. So essentially, they would have a fully pumped up artifact. They would have 3 legendaries from Legion. They would have the Heart of Azeroth. They would have so much power. And because of that, most classes could very quickly solo, say, Freehold or Island Expeditions. For an example, you could actually solo Freehold in, I think, like 5 minutes, 5.5 minutes. And what a lot of people would do with this is they would boost people. Now, this would broadly happen in a few different ways. Way number one is somebody would make an amazing twink character and they would sell their boosting services. So they'd maybe say, hey, I'll boost you for an hour, give me 5,000 gold, and, we'll go off to the races. You'll get a bunch of XP, I'll get some money. Seems all fair, right? You're just providing a service for in-game currency. That's one way that people would do it. The other way would be sometimes guilds would get that as a setup so that the guild could power level characters up through the Battle for Azeroth content. But of course, there's more things than that. Sometimes people are just going to be playing with a twinked character, and this is obviously a solution to this problem that is pretty extreme. Blizzard have decided that the idea of getting experience while with a twinked character is not something that they want in the game, so they have implemented this change. But the problem is, the problems with this are actually in a lot of different areas. It's worth mentioning that this is also super exploitable, right? Somebody with no XP turned on can go into a dungeon group through the Finder or the pre-made Finder or whatever, and kind of grief people with this. And sure, yeah, you can kick them, but it's a bit of a strange, non-intuitive system, so to me, that's not interesting because it's just so obviously a silly side effect of such a blunt solution. But I thought it was worth at least mentioning that, there's this obvious downside that they seemingly haven't really thought of. And as always with Blizzard, it's like, I will agree that the core issue here is not ideal. It does feel a bit broken, and it is sort of using the game's scaling system in a way that, certainly is gaming the system, right? So there is a problem there. However, just like with a lot of the Fun Police things with Blizzard, I would say this: congratulations, you've solved the problem and you've made your game worse. Yes, it's possible to solve a problem and make your game a little bit worse. And I would say that a lot of that is because World of Warcraft, ideally speaking, is a virtual world. And I think when World of Warcraft is working best, that's when players can kind of have unintentional gameplay experiences. So just having the game's mechanics naturally turn into gameplay that players sort of invent for themselves, like this whole boosting thing. I think that's a real strength in the game, and historically, whenever people talk about the Fun Police, I think that's what they're really talking about. So let's say the recent mount equipment. Well, in order to do the mount equipment system to fix a few problems, Blizzard actually ended up nerfing the Water Striders, making them worse, and then making a bunch of buffs mutually exclusive. So yes, they now have a very cohesive system, but in many ways, they've kind of made the game a little bit worse with that, and that's not really ideal. And if we go back to, say, Legion was a prime example of the Fun Police. I'd say I'd say the best one is the rock feather kite. So that was a toy that would basically just give you a goblin glider, right? Now, you'd use that on top of, I forget the name of the toy, but it would boop you up in the air. So you'd send yourself up in the air, you'd use the rock feather kite, but then you'd use the emerald winds. And that could let you glide across half the map. Like if you went on the high mountain, you could get to anywhere in the expansion. And of course, this was before flying. So Blizzard thought to themselves, that's too powerful, kill it. But the thing was, for players, that was actually a really fun system, because if you were going to use that system, you started having to think about terrain. You had to get some high ground. You had to plan all of your stuff. And what you were doing is you were combining 3 supposedly unrelated items together to come up with a better effect. And that's something the players discovered and had a lot of fun with. And because that was all self-discovered, just natural systemic stuff, it made the World of Warcraft more of a sandbox. And essentially it is the quashing of that sandboxy feel that I think is the issue, really the core issue that we have here with what Blizzard have just done for twinking. Because it essentially is just an unintended gameplay experience, and it really does seem like the second somebody is enjoying the game in a way that Blizzard didn't overtly design, they think of it as a problem and they try to solve it, just that in solving it, they end up making their game just a touch worse. And I think a lot of this just comes down to design mentality. Really, the World of Warcraft team, in my view, are not trying to make a large... I mean, I don't think they're trying to make a sandbox MMO, right? They're trying to make a theme park MMO. But I think they're so fixed to making a theme park MMO that, they sit down and they think, here's our players' gear progression curve over time. Here is our players', available content menu. Here is their list of things that they can do on a daily and weekly basis. Here are the meta goals for their character. But that sort of design thinking has ended up not really leaving a lot of room for just kind of natural systemic banter. And when we look at Classic, actually, Classic was in many ways not that designed, right? They just threw a bunch of toys in the world. Yes, there was a theme park layout, broadly speaking, and that kind of just turned into pretty good, fun gameplay. There was a lot of unintended gameplay experiences in Classic, and I think for a lot of people, that's what gives the world its mystery and its charm. So essentially, that's what I think people mean when they say fun police, and when they talk about Blizzard kind of making these very arbitrary top-down decisions that do whack players in a way that just feels like, we were doing nothing wrong. This wasn't actually damaging anyone. If anything, it was just providing some gameplay. So, why? I think that's really how people feel about changes like this. And, there are some that are a little bit more mixed up and interesting. I think the best example of that is the pre-made group finder. So back in Legion, right, you would have your automated pre-made group finder stuff for world quests, world quest group finder. So you go into a world quest area, boom, button appears, you hit yes, it automatically puts you into a group, and you all, clear through the world quest 5 times faster. And that meant that people were doing a lot of world quests because you would get some pretty quick reward, and that ended up being a normal expected style of gameplay. Yet, it obviously was pretty broken, not really balanced, and yeah, people could just join a group, idle, and get completion. And if you looked at the invasion points from Argus, they were utterly trivialized by that system. However, Blizzard sort of identified a problem there. Right? This is not an intended way to play our game. We don't like it, so they decided to remove it. And what happened when they removed that? Well, turns out world quests are actually really pretty bad quality content. And if people have to spend 4 or 5 times as long doing those world quests, they're not going to feel good about doing world quests. And if you look at Battle for Azeroth and world content, it's not great, is it? Now, it's certainly, it's good that the faction incursions were a bit more, sort of clustered together. It would almost feel like quest stacking. And they're pretty fun in war mode, as long as you get some balance. And thankfully, in the next patch, Nazjatar is pretty in terms of world quests, but Mechagon is actually pretty well structured and a lot more freeform and sandboxy, which is what I want to see from you guys, Blizz. But that world quest group finder thing is another really good example of the fun police. right? Where just the player's perspective and the developer's perspective are so different. And from the player's perspective, it just seems like the developers are deluded. Yeah, from their perspective, they're just fixing a problem. WorldCrest Group Finder, clearly not intended, clearly a bit broken and powerful, but also the devs are clearly deluded in thinking that world quests are really good content in, current year. So that's a bit of a tricky situation. Overall, what is this change doing, though, from patch 8.2? I mean, we've just talked about philosophy and sort of, historical stuff for a bit, but we do need to talk about the next patch and what this all sort of means. And there is a little bit of a tinfoil hat theory that we could put on. And that tinfoil hat theory is that Blizzard don't want people trivializing 110 to 120. And, if they were going to do the level 120 boost, if they were going to do that in patch 8.3, it would make a lot of sense to remove the thing that trivializes that section of leveling, wouldn't it? And I can't say they're doing this, and it's obviously the sort of thing that they would deny, but if you look at that recent survey that we covered in the news video, right, that survey question was, would you like, would you partake in a level boost that cost $40 that saved you 120 hours? So it is clear that, at least from the business analytics section of Blizzard, they view the level boost as time is money, friend. That's how they view it, right? They view it as being time is money. So if they see something that is a little bit too much and they nerf it, it does make the value proposition of a level 120 boost a little bit better. Are they doing that? I don't know. They might, though. They certainly might, and to be honest, I would have been more suspect of that a while ago, but now I'm actually a lot more willing to think that there's an okay chance that's what they're doing. So a little bit of that, but also I actually do overwhelmingly think that this primarily is just the devs seeing this as unintended gameplay, seeing it as a problem, and deciding to fix the problem. Instead of, and this is what I wish Blizzard would do, and I think this is just their design culture, their design DNA. It clearly is something like that, because regardless of expansion, this is how they've operated. They don't embrace the fun. That's the problem over there. They don't embrace the fun. They can only seemingly think of fun in terms of the fun that they design, but they seemingly just are not willing to let things happen naturally and actually play along with it. Now, it could be that this whole twinking situation is not the ideal time for them to just see that something odd's happening and play along with it. But let's go back to that rock feather kite, a Brulfist Idol, that was the toy, and Emerald Wind example, okay? They could have noticed, hang on a second, players are really enjoying this form of gliding, because you got to remember, you had to sort of do the technique right, and then you would have to refresh your Emerald Winds every few seconds while you were gliding. So they could have thought to themselves, this is a form of traversal that our players are actually enjoying. And it's not broken in the way that flying is, right? It doesn't, you can't use a glider and then go up a tower and skip everything. So how about they see that that's fun, they see the players enjoy doing that, and they think, why don't we embrace this? Why don't we make this a game mechanic? Why don't we actually try to design a really fun glider that you can use in World of Warcraft? We've had the Goblin Glider for a long time, and you know what? Maybe we could take the signal that players enjoy using the Goblin Glider and actually turn that into something that's a bit more fun. Maybe they could put little heat vents in some zones, right? So you go in your glider, you go up, and you could create some really cool gliding gameplay. And you could do something like that in a way that it could just add a nice little layer of traversal along the game. Even take the clicking on the grappling points in Stormheim. Now, I get that was themed around Stormheim, and maybe you don't want it in every zone, but maybe, you click on the grappling point, and this is a great example of game mechanics naturally coming together to combine to be really powerful. You could click on that, they could program it so you just, you get some momentum, you use your glider, right? And then, that would be really fun. You'd be swinging around the place. What I'm trying to say is, there's a lot of ways in which players will just, with the systems that they're given, they'll find things. They'll naturally gravitate towards some things that they find to be really fun. And I think Blizzard could do a far better job of actually observing those things that players do and trying to think about why they are fun, trying to understand why. and they could learn a lot from that. In this case, maybe the reason why people are doing this twink level boosting so much is because they don't enjoy the leveling process of BFA. Maybe there's a design thing they could learn from that. With the gliders, like maybe, sure, people are doing it because they get around the place, but they're also doing it because it's really fun. Maybe with the World Quest stuff, I mean, sure, people are primarily doing it because it's super quick, but maybe one of the nice things about it was just how many people you'd see while you were going across the world. And maybe there's a way they could better learn from that and create that fun experience just more often and more naturally through game mechanics that are not contrived, such as having to use an add-on. So I think there's a lot that Blizzard could learn that they just miss out on because of their seemingly just the DNA of their company, how they do things. And sometimes it is pretty darn frustrating to see it happen because you're looking there and it's like, we want you to do well. We want 8.2 to be better. And being real, this doesn't really affect 8.2, right? 8.2 is still going to be a really solid patch. This is just an example of, oh God, Blizz, really? So, we're all there like, come on, we want you to do well. We are cheering for you, Blizz. And then, you look over, you're like, they just self-owned again. Could they please not? So there you go. That is in a very loose, rambly video. That's my thoughts on this change. I think it is pretty needless. I don't think it serves any particularly positive purpose. All that it does is kill a gameplay niche that people were enjoying. And frankly, in BFA, if there is a gameplay niche that people are enjoying, even if it's not perfect, how about you let them enjoy it until you release the good expansion? Right? I mean, assuming 9.0 is going to be good, but surely the pragmatic thing would just be to let it lie and, deal with it as a part of an expansion that gives people a lot of good things. Anyway, there we go. Let me know what you think down below. Very keen to hear, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled content tomorrow.